So, venturing into another black hole. Hello and thank you for clicking on this video where I'll be sharing my experience on Fio's newest entry speakers, and this is the Fiio SA1, which comes with a price tag of $149 US. Before we dive deeper into the video, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Fiio for sending this unit in exchange for my honest feedback. However, as always, all thoughts and opinions are my own and are not influenced by any parties. If you've been enjoying my content, please do consider hitting that like and subscribe button. That will help the channel a lot and I appreciate your support. For accessories, they provided you with a few cables for connectivity, some RCA cables with a 3.5mm jack on one end, a connecting cable for your speakers, a controller which uses AAA batteries, we'll get to this later, the Fiio manual, and of course the speakers themselves. And these speakers look real nice. Dark wooden finish with chamfered edges and also a powder coated look finish in like a dark gray color to complete the look of the SA1 speakers. The 3.5-inch aluminium magnesium alloy tweeter at the top with the 3.5mm woofer at the bottom. Both components has a grill over at the front that is non-removable, and it comes in like a silver finish around the ring to further accentuate the detail, and there's really not much more I need to say, just a very sleek looking design. And there's even a white version to this, but I just love the dark design theme and the choices they made with the SA1. Just beautiful. The left speaker doesn't have any inputs or buttons aside from one input to connect the speakers from left to right, and all of the inputs and buttons are located on the right speaker. So you have two knobs on the side with a power button, very reminiscent of the Edifier 1280dB, which I'll talk about more later in the comparison section of the video. So just going through the knobs, the power button is pretty self-explanatory where pressing it once will turn on and off the device, and you have a light indicator at the top knob which acts as a volume control, but also the toggle switch when you press it. The second knob is the bass knob, and it's purely for bass control, which we'll explore later in the sound section of the video. So going back to the volume knob, pressing once will alternate between each mode and is indicated by the lighting color. So you have sky blue for RCA input, pink for phono input, green for auxiliary, purple for optical, yellow for coaxial, orange for USB-C input, and blue for Bluetooth connectivity. The colors on this LED isn't as vibrant, so it's not as distinct or clear on certain colors, but you'll get the gist of it after a while. The only issue when using the physical button is having to cycle through the options until you get to your intended setting, which is why they provided you with a controller as shown earlier, so make sure you don't lose this. So for the controller, it pretty much saves you the time of toggling between each settings, and they also have a power on button, mute button, and media controls like forward and backwards track, pause and play, and volume control. But unfortunately my controller was faulty right out of the box, so that's a bit disappointing, but that's why you have your Fiio app. Stay tuned for that. And also volume control, but something to note, the volume control doesn't really work with Windows as it can be buggy at times, so this comes in handy. So the speakers will enter standby after 20 minutes of no input, but it'll wake up once it detects a signal, but that means that there is a small lag whenever you play your sound from your computer connected directly into the speakers, which is a small inconvenience as you'd have to wake it up first if you don't want that audio lag. However, you can switch this off in the app, but we'll talk about later. So just going through the outputs at the back, you've got phono inputs, coaxial, optical input, USB-C input, RCA input, auxiliary input, and you've got an output for subwoofer and a switch to toggle between RCA in or phono on the fly, so you can connect a lot of things from your subwoofer to your vinyl record player, desktop, laptop, or phone if you want to connect it wireless. So there's plenty of available options for you. If plugged in directly via USB-C, the SA1 can only support up to 24-bit 96 kHz. So if you want anything higher than that, you can pair it up with a DAC for a slightly better quality if you could hear the difference at those levels. If I'm using this speaker with my desktop setup, I typically pair it with a small DAC, something like the Neo Hippo DC1 or even the Alpha Audio Zen DAC V3. Something compact to suit the design theme of the SA1, but your preferences may vary. Speaking of connections, once you connect your speaker to your phone, you can tinker with the sound a little bit more through the Fiio control app. But something to note about the Bluetooth connectivity, especially with my phone, there's a bit of an audio lag as well between the content playing and the sound coming out of the speakers. If you're having media or game playing, then you're going to have that small lag. Not a huge deal breaker, but it can dampen that experience a little. Back to the Fiio app. So you just have to add the device through the Fiio app once you connect it via Bluetooth, and on the main interface you can toggle between power saving mode, you can toggle mute, and you can change the input source from your phone itself. So your phone is acting as a mini controller essentially. There's even an audio tab where you can control the device volume and the channel balance. There's a tab for the guide if you do lose the manual. On the top right you have the settings where you can custom device name, check firmware upgrade, clear Bluetooth pairing, restore to default settings, or shut down device. And the best part of this, you have a tab where they give you a 31 band EQ setting. Yep, you heard me right. Not 10, not 15, but 30 freaking 1. So you can EQ to your heart's desire. However, if that's a little too much for you, they even give you some presets to choose from. So you've got about 8 different presets to choose on top of 3 custom settings of your own tinkering. So a total of 11 presets you can choose. Going to the advanced setting, you can even select the filter type you want to choose for your custom tuning. So like I said, plenty of tinkering options for your sound. So personally, I'd bring the treble up a little because of how the sound is presented at stock. Let's dive deeper into that. Of course, this is just talking about stock tuning with my current setup. You can improve the sound ever so slightly with minor adjustments as mentioned earlier, and also with the assistance of the EQ adjustments through the app. But it won't change it too much from the stock sound as described earlier, but also the placement of the speakers influence the sound ever so slightly. This is explained in Fiio's manual, which is a great read for anyone just starting out this hobby. So there are even speaker stands out there that are meant to tilt your speaker so the tweeter is facing towards your ears. There's plenty of articles and videos about this, but if you're not bothered to do all that, the speaker still works great generally. So if I'm just listening to them without the speaker stand and just placing them facing towards me at my desk, and when it's positioned properly, you'll get the illusion of the sound coming at you from the center rather than listening to something coming out from the left and right. The bass presentation can be adjusted through the bass knob as mentioned earlier, but it's also a subtle adjustments where turning it all the way down. The bass will come through like BA bass, where you're hearing the impact and slam, but not necessarily feeling the weight, and then turning it all the way up, you have the punch coming through, the weight of the bass note, but it's not too overbearing. But of course, my personal preference is right smack in the middle, where the bass is not overwhelming the frequency, but it's also not too limp. It would also help with the presentation because of the SA1. Treble is a little bit subdued, so the treble extension is pushed back, so I'm not getting that sharpness or that open sounding note for the trumpets, so the bass adjustments will definitely influence how much of that comes through. Imaging is pretty good for a speaker at this price point and size. The vocals are coming through much more prominent with that warmth from the lower regions, which is nice if you're into vocals, and it's positioned right at the center of the soundstage, and the macro details can be heard. And with speakers you have that wider sense of soundstage due to the nature of the design, but it's also within the same plane, and there's not much depth to the soundstage, and with the lack of the micro nuances that are coming through, that illusion of depth is not as present or prominent. But again, it also comes down to limitations of the driver sizes, but again, for something this compact, is doing more than I thought it could, which is a nice little surprise. So comparing it with the Edifier 1280dB, unfortunately I've sold that speaker for the next level up, so just going based off memory, the 1280dB is definitely taller and slimmer in depth, so it's more of a rectangular shape compared to the SA1, which is more of a square shaped speaker. The design theme is pretty similar aside from the design and placement of the driver and tweeter, but they both have wooden finish and the powder coated plate around, but the Edifier has a much lighter color scheme, and the 1280dB has an additional treble knob, but Fiio has the app feature and the EQ, which puts the tinkability up another notch. Both are Bluetooth speakers, but in terms of input, the Edifier is a bit more limited, where it only has RCA inputs, but it has 2 of them, coaxial and optical. So if you want to use this speaker with your computer or laptop, you have to connect it via Bluetooth or use a DAC, whereas the Fiio SA1 can use USB-C, and it can connect out to a subwoofer as well. It has phono inputs as well, so it has a lot more features than the Edifier speakers. But to be fair, the 1280dB has been around for a lot longer, so it'll be interesting to see what the successor to this is, if they manage to match the SA1 in terms of features, but that's the future talk. And as of now, the Fiio SA1 comes out on top for features, but what about sound? Again, this is going off on memory, but the SA1 is definitely much warmer and thicker in its sound presentation compared to the Edifier speakers. I remember needing to turn up the bass and also the treble treble knob on the 1280 dB because it's a bit more neutral and flatter in its sound presentation, so I made it a little bit more V-shaped, but that also means the micro details are coming through just a touch sharper. But when it comes to this price, they both deliver. If you want something a bit more dynamic and with a bit more customizability and option, the Fiio SA1 is a clear winner between the two, at least for me. Of course, it will be unfair to compare this against Edifier's bigger brother because of the size of the drivers and price, so I may do that in a separate video on how different tiered speakers sound to me. So if you're interested in that video, let me know in the comment section down below. So in summary, Fiio has been knocking things out of the park lately, especially with their budget range releases, and the Fiio SA1 is another great addition to their budget lineup. And this is one product that I can easily recommend for anyone either starting their journey into speakers or just want something compact and feature friendly, but still delivers better sound quality than your Logitech speakers. Yes, I'm calling you out, Logitech. However, this is based on one man's experience, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. Are you excited for the SA1, or what is your top pick for budget speakers at this price range? Comment below and let me know. And with that all said, thank you once again to Fiio for this opportunity and to all of you for watching. Until the next video, take care and happy listening.